Today is a joint session for the Pan-Canadian Electric Bus Demonstration and Integration Trial, Phase 3. It's the first of a series of 3 consultation sessions, and we're launching this jointly with our latest report, the Zero Emissions Bus Database Report, number 5. Next slide, please. I'll start with a land acknowledgement. While we wait for other folks to join, as we gather virtually today, I want to acknowledge that we are connecting from many different parts of Canada, each with its own unique history and relationship with Indigenous peoples. I am currently joining from Calgary, and I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. I also want to share that CUTRIC's commitment to reconciliation extends beyond this land acknowledgement. We are dedicated to meaningful actions that reflect our values of inclusion, equity, and sustainability as we work towards a just and greener future for all. So we are guided by a gender and racial diversity policy, and in support of economic empowerment, we support Indigenous-led businesses whenever possible. We are also committed to supporting ongoing research and advocating for federal investment in investigating missing and murdered Indigenous women and children, as well as the mass and unmarked graves of children who were victims of the residential school system. Finally, as part of our broader mission, we aim to build a greener Canada through innovation. We actively support climate change initiatives that enhance sustainable mobility in Indigenous communities, recognizing the intersection between environmental justice and Indigenous rights. Next slide, please. So later on today, we will have a roundtable discussion, and in preparation for that, may I ask that you please add the name of the organization that you're representing in your Zoom display name. So there are 2 ways to do that. You can either click on the three dots above your video thumbnail to look for the rename function, or you can go to the participants panel at the bottom and look for your name and then click the option to rename. As we are being joined today, next slide, please. As we are being joined today by both members and non-members of CUTRIC, please allow me some time to show what CUTRIC is about. Okay, so we are a technology consortium. We're made up of over 130 members. We are a nonprofit organization seeking to position Canada as a global leader in low-carbon smart mobility. So our mission is to drive the commercialization of cutting-edge technologies through industry-led research, development, demonstration, and integration projects. So this is why today we're going to cover the phase 3 of our electric bus trial. So as a technology consortium, we may differ from other industry associations that you know about. Our members are leaders in innovation. So our members are committed to testing and deploying the latest technologies to enable faster, more affordable, and environmentally sustainable transit solutions. Next slide, please. I just wanted to quickly touch on CUTRIC's 5 pillars of innovation. So what guides our work. So these act as strategic lanes that help us decide which projects and initiatives to pursue, ensuring that every effort aligns with our vision and mission. We focus exclusively within these lanes. So each represent a core area where CUTRIC aims to lead in innovation. As shown here, the Pan-Canadian Electric Bus Demonstration and Integration Trial falls under the propulsion technologies pillar, but we also have multiple other initiatives in different project stages across the other pillars. So the 3 highlighted at the left of the screen are our commercialization initiatives, and these are focused on demonstrating that these technologies will perform well in real-world scenarios in specific Canadian locations. Join me in welcoming CUTRIC's President and CEO, Josipa Petric.
Thanks so much, Jenny. Folks, a little bit of background here. This is the Pan-Canadian Electric Bus Demonstration and Integration Trial, Phase 3. And so just to give folks a bit of that historical where we came from to where we're going, Where we came from, and several of you are on the line, is the Pan-Canadian Electric Bus Demonstration Integration Trial Phase 1 that started way back in 2016 when we came up with the idea at CUTRIC of standardizing high power overhead charging systems. That just did not exist at that time. And for those of you in the transit world, you knew that at that time, BYD had its own standard, New Flyer had its own standard, Volvo Group and Nova Bus had its own standard coming off the OpCharge protocol. That was not even a standard, it was just a published protocol. And then the Proterra had a different standard, and everybody was jockeying for position at the Society of Automotive Engineers to establish what the J3105 standard ought to look like. If you were part of that standards group, you know how hot and heavy it got, including with threats of lawsuits. So going back to 2016, which incredibly was 8 years ago, it was a hot mess of a situation in the industry, and there was simply no standardization. Now, in that project, we reached out to all the bus manufacturers, including Gillig and Eldorado and others in the United States that don't deploy in Canada and don't sell in Canada. And we reached out to every charging manufacturer under the sun, of which there were a lot of startups at that time and some established players that weren't established in the charging world, but they were established as energy providers. So the ABBs and the Siemens who had pantograph systems for rail or energy storage devices, et cetera. At that time, only New Flyer Nova Bus agreed that they would, on their own dime, redesign their buses to accommodate a common OpCharge protocol for overhead charging that has a pantograph down system where the pantograph comes down from the overhead charger. So they agreed, and they agreed that given no published standard and the fact that the SAE body was in the midst of hot and heavy debate over whose standard would be picked and what would get published ultimately, we went with the OpCharge protocol, which Volvo Group had published openly in Europe. It was about 80% of what the J3105 high power charging system standard ended up being, which today is now published, which everybody buys according to if they're buying high power charging systems at all. So the result of that was we had 2 manufacturers swallow losses. Yes, they did sell buses into this project. They sold a total of 18 buses and 7 overhead chargers. So yes, ABB and Siemens did the same. They swallowed losses, redesigned, cross-tested, tested for interoperability on their own dime. And then they did make money, all of them, by selling products into this project, which was a sole source arrangement. But the reality is they did not make profit. And I think that's very important to underscore because the project was a TRL, a technology readiness level project at level 5, ending at level 8 to 9. And if you speak the technology readiness language, you'll know that what that means is the buses were market ready. They were TRL 9, off the shelf. You could buy them, not perfect, but off the shelf. The chargers, in theory, were off the shelf. You could buy them too, but nobody had packaged them together in a system to show that they actually would work together when you had New Flyers and Novas under the same chargers deployed by ABB and Siemens. And lo and behold, we had 3 transit agencies stick it out as champions. You cannot do commercialization projects in any industry, in particular in transit where it's publicly backed and taxpayer funded, unless you have champions at the table. And that's not just the organization. You have to have a general manager or a CEO or lead staff who are going to roll up their sleeves, take a hit potentially on their career if it doesn't work out well, stick it through the highs and the lows. And there are a lot of lows when commercializing and trying to demonstrate new technology that everybody says is market ready, but the system's never been deployed. And lots of stuff will go wrong. So we had TransLink come forward, true leaders. Brampton, absolutely the leader in the industry with the largest deployment and the most well-designed deployment in the sense that they took the extra time to make sure that all of the standardized and interoperable components were part of it, and York Region Transit. So that allowed for 3 jurisdictions, 3 cities effectively, across 5 routes, with a total of 7 overhead chargers deployed with those 18 vehicles. It got deployed by 2019. There were a lot of funding ups and downs. We had to hunt for the money, advocate for it, but it did get deployed. And then we tracked the buses and the chargers, reported on those data points, a lot of surprises in there. Some of that information is going to come out next year as we've come out of the project now with project completion having happened this year. It did change the industry. We had leaders at Newmarket Power Distribution in North York. They were the first and only utility in the country and in North America to buy high power chargers on behalf of transit to test out whether there was a regulatory innovation that these things could be passed into the rate. It's not going to go that way. And so ultimately there was a test test on the policy and the test proved that the policy mechanism wouldn't work, equally important to an industry. So that's all to say, that's where we started. These are not easy projects, but the project did change the industry fundamentally. And now if you're buying high power charging systems, you're buying systems that have been standardized off the backs of this project. So if we just move forward to share with you where we went from there. You may remember, if you're a transit agency in particular, we'll just move forward one slide. If you're a transit agency or an industry partner in particular, you may remember that our phase one project originally had phase two and phase three backed onto it. So phase one was to demonstrate for the first time in the world interoperable standardized high power charging systems. It remains the first and only project in the world to do that in terms of competitive mode. It aimed to go from the OpCharge protocol to a J3105 SAE standard publication to truly prove out, at least in paper and then in actuality, interoperability. And it achieved that. In the words of several folks, they literally slept under the chargers to make those things work once the vehicles and the chargers arrived. And then it achieved 30 months of data collection on did the buses, did the chargers connect, power up, and operate the way that manufacturers thought they would, and the way that transit agencies thought they would or hoped they would. And all of that data was shared in a steering committee behind closed doors over several years. We all learned a lot from that. The industry learned a lot from it. The manufacturers got a lot of information to improve their product line. And the transit agencies got their first deployment, realizing just how big these kinds of deployments are. So from that, we originally intended that phase two would have energy storage devices attached to it, because those were the days prior to energy service as a service coming out, where transit thought, and it was a legitimate view, that we could potentially own and operate energy storage devices to peak shave high peak periods, which were driving the cost profile for high power charging systems. As a result of phase one finally getting money, but a very extended period. Some of you will remember we won money and then government changed and we lost the money because the minister changed before we could get the money. We had to go back to the federal government. We had to lobby ministers again. We had to get new money. And then it ended up being different kinds of pots of money for 3 different cities. Hats off to Natural Resources Canada, which was the first funder to the table to get this project out the door. And then we had, again, Environment Canada with NRCan come back in to save the day after provincial funding disappeared. And hats off to the BC government and the cities of Brampton and York region that put in the cash to make this project come to fruition. It was over $45 million in total across all of those assets. So no small amount of change. And then if you add in the millions of dollars that the industry partners sunk through losses to make the stuff work and to get it to function during these commercialization trial periods, it was well over $50 million as a project that we put together, deployed, launched, and have come out the other end with. And so the idea through this whole period, as we were predictively analyzing and empirically tracking, was energy storage devices could help reduce costs if transit agencies bought and owned their own. We actually did win federal money for that, $5 million for Halifax, Burlington, and Brampton. But if you were part of that project, you'll remember that the phase one project was stalled in Ontario because of change of government. So the federal money for the phase two energy storage device project disappeared and expired before we could deploy it in Halifax, in Burlington, and in Brampton. And so that project stalled. And then the third phase was when we would come back to energy storage to automate the vehicles to the chargers. So to make sure that the buses and the chargers could be automatically connected to get over the problem of drivers pulling in and pulling out of overhead charging systems and wasting precious seconds or minutes of time for charging. So those were always the intentions. And phase one was very successful in this regard. Phase two, as I said, got funding, but it expired. And then the pandemic hit and we put a slowdown on being able to effectively get funding for the phase three. And because of the delay in the deployment in the agencies in Ontario, we wanted to get the full slate of those 30 months of data collection before moving to the next phase of commercialization. So that's where we are now, having learned all of those things. If we go forward one slide, walking you through some of the insights that we gleaned from this project that have led to what we're about to launch today in terms of getting to another go, no go. Throughout this project, we collected a lot of data from those transit agencies, from the loggers. We also put independent veracity loggers on all the buses and the chargers. And then we were pulling the data from the Siemens loggers, the ABB loggers, the New Flyers, and data dumps from Nova Bus. And so we were also in the course of that project, and still today, comparing standardized, let's say, common logger data in this case from Vericity loggers across all of those assets, 7 charges and 18 buses, with the OEM loggers to see if they're calibrated, because a kilowatt hour per kilometer might not be calibrated equivalently, which is a huge cost differential. So that was part of the project. And that grew into what is now our phase 2. As opposed to an energy storage device deployment, phase 2 became the second generation of data tracking. And some of you will know that phase 2 eBus has launched under 2 portfolios. One is we got the money out the door with the support of the government of Ontario to initiate the build out of our cloud transit platform. The goal here is not just to get logged electric bus data and charger data from ABB and Siemens and New Flyer Nova Bus in TransLink, York Region, and Brampton, because we had that data flowing in. It's now to add every other electric bus out there and every other charger. The grand goal here is to launch a national ACES cloud transit database, which would stand on its own as the database in real time, where every electric and hydrogen fuel cell bus and potentially renewable natural gas vehicle and every charging system that has a logger on it, and all of them do these days, built in or aftermarket added, all of them logging into one grand data portfolio. And that platform can either be accessed by transit directly to run your own analytics reports, so you can see how your buses and your chargers compare to the aggregation of all the rest in Canada that are logged and tracked, or to specific types and models in particular cities. Maybe Brampton wants to see how its New Flyers compare to New Flyers operating in Winnipeg, and the database would allow you to pull those reports. And it will also allow CUTRIC to continue serving as the nonprofit analyst for many of the agencies that would like that data but may not have staff. You may not have data analysts on staff able to go in and mine the raw data and pull the analytical reports. So you'd like to have CUTRIC do that for you. So this is phase 2, and some of that funding to launch this has been moved forward in partnership with the Ontario Public Transit Association. Great leadership from Karen Cameron and the board at Opta, as they were able to host some of the funding to get this out the door. And then some of it is also being developed at the national level right now through a project with the AIEQ, which is the Association de l'Industrie électrique du Québec, which Jess Smith is project managing right now. So we found 2 pots of funding to start to build out the platform, the coding, the input, the logger data, and start to solve all the problems that come when you're trying to track 300 electric buses with a half a dozen different types of loggers that may not be calibrated and may not be standardized. So we're on the pathway, and I truly believe this is gold. I believe that this is the kind of data analytics that is golden to the industry, because it allows transit to track performance. Did you get the performance out of the vehicle systems and chargers or hydrogen fueling solution that you thought you would get when you paid and procured at the price that you paid and procured? It creates a huge amount of power through data for the taxpayer at the city level. But importantly, it also allows industry manufacturers to log in and see, are our buses, let's say I'm Nova Bus or I'm New Flyer, or I'm BYD, I want to log in. I want to see how our vehicle systems are performing compared to the aggregation of all of my competitors across the country. Hugely powerful. Obviously, as a nonprofit, this is a sustainable revenue mode for us with our members, but I think it's a critical type of data element that is going to improve the industry, so we can all get out of the qualitative guesstimation of batteries will get better. Well, are they? Buses will get better. Are they? The only way we know is by tracking the data in real time, and that's what phase 2 has become. So we haven't lost sight of phase 3, however. Although now the idea of transit agencies owning and operating energy storage devices on their own as their own assets has started to dissipate because of the rise of the energy as a service marketplace, which allows transit to potentially just outsource that problem. What has not disappeared is the need for automated charger controls. And coming onto the market, of course, is the critical importance of inductive charging. So wherever it's new and it's not proven out and it's not 100% for sure, but the manufacturers think it's market ready and want to pitch it as market ready, that means it's a TRL 5 to 6 project, and that's where CUTRIC thrives and lives. So hence our launch today of this initiative, because although we know technically now, after several months of researching this to prepare for today, we know what would need to be done to make this market ready and a viable product for transit to procure. It may not be that we have the champions. Okay, we had champions at TransLink in York Region and Brampton Transit in past years for eBus phase 1. If we cannot find equivalent transit champions in the next 2 months, starting with today, well, then there's no place to deploy. And we may not have manufacturers that want to be champions. And so that's a critical element too, because the manufacturers cannot simply offer to sell their products into a sole source commercialization project and walk away with some form of profit. It has to be to sell the product in a sole source arrangement where they are on the hook for making that stuff work, which can cost hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, depending on how many problems arise in the deployment. So there has to be skin in the game. And those are the in-kind contributions and real cash-based contributions, as well as the fact that the project will have to have standardization at the core. So let's move forward one slide. I'm going to walk you through where we are today. The idea came up earlier this year. It actually came up last year. Hats off to Majdi, who is our membership lead, hearing from some of our members on the industry side that there is now a time and a place for a phase 3 deployment, commercialization deployment at CUTRIC, and that it should involve inductive charging. So since in-depot low-powered charging is standardized, nobody has concerns around that. Maybe it could get more nimble and less boxy and less space intense, but there aren't really huge innovation solution issues there. Since that's the case, and since the en route charging systems have been standardized very heavily through our own project work in J3105, now let's look at inductive charging. And we do know that inductive charging has been kind of hanging out there in the background, and lots of people have talked about it, but it kind of has the profile of hydrogen years ago, that it's not yet market ready. So this is where CUTRIC wants to move. And we have manufacturing partners that are in the inductive charging space saying and telling us that it's now at a stage where it's ready, not just to be piloted, but potentially commercialized and used. On the flip side, we have our transit members who are saying it's interesting intellectually and possibly even quantitatively in terms of efficiencies for decarbonization, but we don't know enough about it. We don't know if it's safe. We're not sure about the standards. And what about interoperability? Can every kind of bus operate with any kind of inductive charging, or is there an interoperability and standardization problem? So to figure out if we have enough champions to move forward, knowing now what we know, which is the eBus project took several years and over $1 million of membership dues over those years to get out the door with no guarantee of success. So mind you, the Nova buses and the New Flyers and ABBs and Siemens and York Regions and TransLinks and Bramptons, they all paid membership dues for several years with no guarantee that this thing would get out the door, because it's tough technically and politically to get the funding and the technological partnership. So we have to find out now, are there enough members within the CUTRIC family that would be willing to be enough of champions to pay their membership dues to pay for the development of this kind of deployment? That's question number one. And then question number two is, if there are they willing to stick it out if it takes 12 to 18 months or 24 months, not just to iron out the technical interoperability elements through an MOU, but also to go get the money and convince levels of government to pay for stuff that is not off the shelf market ready. Those are the two critical elements. So to start it off in April, we issued a survey to find out, because if our members came back and said, interesting intellectually, philosophically, I'm inspired, but absolutely no, will I be your champion? I won't take it to council. I won't advocate for it. And we're not going to put any money into this. If that was the answer we got in April, well, then we would have killed the idea. We would have said it's very nice, but unfortunately we cannot deliver a commercialization project. There's no way to pay for the development work. In April, we issued that survey asking our members, how familiar are you with inductive charging? How interested are you in exploring inductive charging? And how would your agency be interested in a pilot project on inductive charging? Noting that in the background, our goal was also to incorporate automated inductive charging or automated pantograph charging as part of this deployment. So we were looking not just at the manual dumb charging mechanism, but automating these things if potentially possible. So we'll go forward one slide just to give you the outcomes of that. We sent the survey to 700 contacts. We had 26 organizations respond. And so we were very happy with that. Thank you very much. That represents about 20% of our membership responding, and the numbers are reflected in the response from each of the respondents. We had 36 respondents, but from 26 organizations, so we did have to mine for duplicate responses from common organizations. Nonetheless, the results are enough for us to have the session today, because it's enough for us to have spent time in July, August, September researching the technology, finding out if there's an interoperability or standardization problem or gap that a CUTRIC commercialization project could solve, and then liaising at our conference and through one-to-one meetings with industry and transit to see beyond the survey, is there like enough interest that you would actually roll up your sleeves and help us get to work in deploying this, given that it's probably going to be very hard. And the answer was yes. So in the how familiar is your agency with inductive charging? Only a few said very. 11 said not at all, and 22 said somewhat. So the somewhat and not at all are the target group. They're the group that we're thinking, okay, are you interested enough to move forward because you think it could be of interest? How interested is your agency in exploring inductive charging solutions for your fleet? Very. So while most of our agencies said they're either not at all or somewhat, only somewhat knowledgeable about it, nonetheless, 12 said they're very interested and 24 said somewhat. None said not at all. So that's a very good sign for a CUTRIC commercialization project. And lastly, would your agency be interested in a pilot project? Because the first two questions are interesting intellectually, but if nobody wants to actually pilot, but then it's dead. It's dead in the waters. So 5 agencies said no. You know, under no circumstances would we be willing to pilot this kind of technology, even though we may be interested in it and know a little bit about it. But 31 said yes. So that is technically defined as awesome. And therefore, we are going to move forward with at least the first stages of commercialization to see if we can get to a go, no go within the truncated period, knowing that our commercialization projects in the past have taken years to get off the ground. And we heard from members in past years during our membership SWATs that we had to go from 4 years to 2 years. Well, we achieved that. We went from 4 years to 2 years to 18 months with our CUTZEB initiative. So CUTZEB was our last commercialization initiative around joint procurement for electric bus and charger through a turnkey solution. That took 18 months to get out the door from the day we started the consultation, like today, to the day we had a signed MOU or signed set of partnerships. And having said that, in this scenario, we are looking for now truncating that to 3 to 6 months. So meeting our membership goal of getting to a go, no go on complex technology. So here, just to walk you through and close out the history to explain to you where we've gotten to, and now we're going to go into the consultation, is in terms of the historical overview, we're looking at that automated guidance for inductive charging system implementation. So this project would focus not just on inductive charging, but the automated guidance for inductive charging with a standard, and focusing on autonomous driving level 4 for that purpose. So there's a bus driver. There's a bus driver on the bus at all times. But the intention here is whether it's inductive charging, which is the core goal, or ideally the standardized communication between the inductive charger and the pantograph charger, so that the bus driver who may be on a route with both pantograph or inductive can be technically hands-free. Obviously, they're going to have hands on the steering control, but the idea is that the bus and the charger are communicating to optimally align the vehicle over the inductive charging unit or under the pantograph, and that comms, that communications mechanism, is standard for the pantograph as well as the inductive charger, so that you don't have interference. There's a communication protocol, say, between the bus and the inductive charger that interferes with the communication protocol between the electric bus and the pantograph system. So this is important. Now, I do want to say thank you, yes, to our colleagues at Brampton. Thank you, Scott, for flagging this. It's important here for CUTRIC to flag. We refer to trials, not pilots. And this has been part of our mechanism and our definition for years. A pilot is something that comes and goes. Lots of agencies have done pilots. So an autonomous shuttle for 3 weeks, or an electric bus for 6 weeks, or a fuel cell bus for 3 months. That's a pilot. It's here, it's tested a little bit, and then it goes. It's not part of your full fleet. Our trials always intend that this technology becomes a permanent part of your fleet. Maybe it's not the primary part of your fleet, but if you're part of this project, it's because you're not just procuring and engaging and signing an MOU and lobbying and advocating and doing all the tech work for a 3-month show and tell. It is a 3 to 5 year show and tell where the asset is intended to live within your fleet thereafter. The 3 to 5 year period is to get over all the hurdles, to realize all the in-kind contributions by the manufacturers, to solve and iron out the initial adoption headaches and drama associated with this new technology, and then to obtain at least 3 to 5 years of data collection on performance. So that is the intention of this project, like all of our projects. Now, just to close out on this element, to give everybody the overview, we'll just go forward one more slide there, noting that element one, again, as I mentioned, is to retrofit a number of heavy-duty electric buses with inductive charging systems and install compatible charging infrastructure at designated locations to integrate the autonomous features. And then element two of the project is to implement an in-depot routine utilizing the level 4 autonomous technology. So the buses are driving over the inductive chargers in autonomous mode in depot. So that is the intention. Now, can we change element 1 and 2? Yes, we can. But those two elements are what have come out of the last 2 months, 3 months of our research after we got that April survey result saying there's enough interest to proceed forward. Now, to go into a couple more of the technical details before we go to the consultation process, what you see here is some of the standards that we can build on. So there are what I'll call partial standards here. We have SAE J2954/2, which is the standard developed by the SAE for wireless power transfer for heavy-duty vehicles. So it exists. Does it exist in deployment in Canada on buses? No. So there we have item number 1 for commercialization demonstration. Does it exist with different manufactured buses and different charging systems? No, not as far as we're aware. Maybe somebody in the somewhere in the heavy duty truck world, it exists in pilot mode or in a lab, but it does not exist in our industry. So the standard needs to be demonstrated through a trial to showcase that it can work and any problems can be overcome. As part of the broader SAE J2954 family of standards, there is a general focus on the wireless charging systems for electric vehicles specifically, and there are technical parameters within that standard for power levels, frequency alignment, communications protocols. Our goal here is in this trial to test those out, to deploy assets, buses, and chargers that would actually test those out, including the safety guidelines to protect the users. So if the inductive chargers are, again, in the depot is our natural landing pad for where we would test this out. If our champions say, look, we want to trial it out in one en route charging location, that's possible to do, but we'd have to build the safety standards around it. And the safety standards exist within SAE J2954, but they haven't been tested out in this industry, certainly not in the transit world. So that's our goal. Next, if we go forward one slide, not surprising to our members, a second goal here is the interoperability. So unlike 2016, where there was no SAE standard, and we were pulling from an op-charge protocol to try to build a standard as we went, here we have a standard, it's just not been demonstrated. So SAE J2954 does promote interoperability. In theory, on paper, it should allow different buses to use the same wireless charging stations, regardless of brand, in theory. But we all know from eBus phase 1 that doesn't work out perfectly in the first deployments. So there's a demonstration and integration trial component here, a lot of in-kind contribution to problem fix, taking the standard on paper to the real world. And then we do know also that within this standard, there's a high transfer rates possible up to 500 kilowatts, but it does produce significant amounts of heat, which means as part of this demonstration trial, we will have to plan around the generation of that heat to prevent damage on the system itself, to prevent damage on the bus, and then to maintain safety. So if it is in the depot, there's safety issues for people and assets. And if it's on the road, there's safety issues. But the standard recognizes that that heat is generated and allows for up to 500 kilowatts nonetheless, which is pretty high power. So even with losses, it's pretty impressive that in theory, on paper, we could go that high. One of the demonstration elements will be how much losses exist. And that's one of the critical complaints about inductive charging and so many losses. It's inefficient as a power transfer mode. Yeah, okay, maybe by the laws of physics, that's true. But on the flip side, there may be a complexity measure that says a 500 kilowatt charging system, even operating at 30% with a nominal power transfer of 200 kilowatts is still less complex than a high power charging system at 450 kilowatts. I don't know. We don't know until we build out this project. So there could be some value in that, the complexity being addressed. And lastly, we'll move to some of the last components. If we go forward one slide on the sensors and cameras. So in this demonstration trial, we have to test out the sensors and cameras. So it's true that they are LiDAR-enabled cameras and sensors on board any vehicle with any kind of automated control. And so that's true. You have the radar, you have the LiDAR, and then you have camera systems. But it hasn't been tested out in our industry, apart from a few pilots of automated buses in the United States, mounting those on the buses or at the charging system to ensure both charging system units or roadside units and the vehicle units actually detect each other and accurately detect the position of the vehicle is going to have to be trialed out here. Because what's the point of doing all this if the driver ends up having to take control to reposition anyhow? So that has to be tested out. The communications protocols need to be tested to ensure that the data transmitted between the bus and the charger and are facilitated in real time, and that the adjustments are made in real time to reposition quickly in a very, very small delta of time. And then the automated controls need to be tested out to make sure that the bus's steering and braking and positioning are executed in a precise manner and in a safe manner over the charging systems or under the charging systems. If we go forward one more slide, some of the additional technical elements within this is that the security of the comms protocol. So we may be able to trial out and showcase through the standard in the deployment, there is a common communications protocol and that it doesn't interfere between charger types. So the comms protocol works between bus and inductive charging. It works between bus and pantograph charger. They don't interfere. But what if they're totally hackable? And so we have to trial out the hackability. And that is a big lesson we learned in eBus phase 1. We did have the University of Windsor do a first analysis in eBus phase 1, and their analysis was pantograph chargers and most chargers in the electric bus world are totally hackable and not very secure at all. Now, the industry's improved a little bit, but I can't say that cybersecurity has been problem number one on the agenda for the electrification. We learned that in eBus phase 1, so we want to bring cybersecurity of those comms protocols right to the forefront, especially if there's any AV component, because God forbid a malicious actor took over control of a vehicle as it's trying to park over an inductive charger and cause damage or harm to human beings. So that security has to be like priority number one, which it wasn't in our eBus phase 1 and truly is not still a priority for the bus transit world. So we're going to try and bring it forward. Then authentication mechanisms, real-time monitoring mechanisms, and then redundancy for fail-safes. These are critical elements around the cybersecurity breaches that are potential, detecting and mitigating cyber attacks that could cause problems not only to the functioning, but to the safety of the system. So there's a cybersecurity component. And if we move forward one more slide, there's a networking component. So here it's the central command and control. This being one of the goals of our autonomous vehicle project that took several years and is our only project to date at CUTRIC that is failed. And by failed, we mean we closed it out without a deployment. And the central command and control was one of those critical elements. So centralized command and control guidance systems is going to be critical in this project to make sure that at the command center, there's centralized command and control networks and shutdown networks, because it's not just the communications of the chargers and the buses. It is, of course, also very critically the automated control element that could be cyber hacked. So these critical elements all form part of what we are proposing right now would be part of this project. The last elements to flag are the other standards on the autonomous driving. So if we go forward one slide, right now, the SAE standard, of course, many of you are familiar with it, J3016, because it was the cornerstone of our autonomous vehicle project that never got out the door. And it does define level 4 high automation with driver control. That's where we're living. We're living in the level 4 world here. We are not proposing automated controls that are level 5 by any stretch of the imagination, nor on a personal note do I think it's appropriate for transit to even go there, but level 4 does work for what we are looking at here to decrease the basically loss of time to optimally position to a charger. So that can be built on, but J3016 doesn't give you the tech specs to build towards. It just gives you a level definition. And so if you go forward one slide, that level definition means that any automated controls within this project, we're intending, and we can modify this with transit partners, but the intention here is that it leverages a highly controlled environment like a depot or a dedicated charging location en route that has parameters around it, that doesn't have people crisscrossing and cars crisscrossing left, right, and center. The intention is it improves operational efficiency. And of course, the goal is reducing the labor cost and the service time that is lost with positioning the vehicle and lost charging opportunities. So having said that, those are the elements that feed into this project. And if we go forward one slide, To summarize, therefore, we have some critical goals here, shrinking to a 3-month go, no go process and improving our efficiencies. We are looking for ultimately here, identifying the key areas of interest in collaboration, which I think we've done, and reviewing what we've just shared with you from the survey plus the tech review. Our goal is in session 1 today to introduce this project concept as we've just done, introduce the high-level intro to the new tech, which we've just done, and then gather now your initial feedback. In session 2, we're going to go more detailed into the tech, but we will want to know by session 2, which is November 28th, are you still interested enough that you could envision signing an MOU to get involved in a trial that is intended to deploy technology that's a permanent part of your fleet around inductive automated controls and inductive charging? So that's what we'll want to know by the 28th. And on the 28th, we're going to go deeper into those tech specs that would form the basis of the MOU. And then by December 19th, our goal is as a Christmas gift to ourselves and to the community, trying to have the go, no go. And by go, no go, we're looking there for agencies to show up and say, yeah, we're in. And by in, we mean we're going to be members of CUTRIC next year, and we want to be part of this project team behind closed doors trying to hash out an MOU within a 6-month period is our goal. So that is where we're going with it. And for those of you who have been through the MOU process, you know that the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding between the GO partners, includes the tech specs, the split on funding, depending on the jurisdictional funding, and then the empirical work that comes with it, and the buy-in. The spirit of the MOU is that we leave no one on the battlefield. When things go wrong, the manufacturers roll up their sleeves and help transit agencies. And when things go wrong, transit agencies don't just willy-nilly exit. They also get to work on trying to fix the problem and also communicate the issues, especially if there's costs associated with resolution. So having said that, that's the history, the overview of where we went through, where we're at. I think it could be the next great thing at CUTRIC in terms of launching this industry. So far, we don't see a coordinated effort in the United States on this, although there are projects, but not a coordinated national effort for standardization in transit. So we have an opportunity. It's an open door, and I'm going to ask our members to help us walk through it together. With that, I'm going to turn to my colleague, Jenny, and we'll just check to see first, Jenny, if there were any questions that were raised during that introductory period that we can address at this time. I don't believe so, although I do see Conrad. Yes, I think you posed the one question.
But I think it's been an engaging chat session, and the question has been answered.
Okay, fantastic. So with that, I know it's a whirlwind tour. So I'm going to turn to Jenny because we have these very specific goals now today. To get to a go, no go, we need to know your level of interest, given now that we've gone deeper into the tech spec of what we'd love to bake into an MOU arrangement. So over to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Josipa. I know that was a lot of information that was shared earlier by both Desmond and Josipa, but let's just take a short step back and just so everyone is on the same page. I'll just go through a brief framework of what a commercialization project is like here in CUTRIC. So we have 6 key components that define a CUTRIC commercialization project, and each of these play a role in our mission to bring impactful and sustainable transit innovation to Canada. I'll go into detail into each one. I'll try to go quickly, but I feel that you need these to make a decision so that you also understand and manage expectations on how we're going to run this project. So next slide, please. So the first is technology readiness. So each CUTRIC commercialization project begins with technologies at mid-range readiness level. So that's TRLs 5 to 6. We work towards elevating these to TRLs 8 or 9. So often there are specific components that are highly developed on their own, but they have not been demonstrated as part of a full integrated system. So CUTRIC will bridge this gap, and we will validate and refine these technologies together in real-world applications. Next slide, please. So next is the multi-stakeholder engagement. So this is why we're all here today. Each project requires at least 2 transit agencies and 2 technology suppliers. So this creates a collaborative environment that brings diverse perspectives and resources. So for example, from our previous projects with 3 participating agencies have made faster progress and had greater impact. And we're able to collect more data, which gives us more informed decisions later on. Conversely, with projects with a single agency will cause delays, because if there's a delay with that agency, then the whole project just stops or is paused. So multi-stakeholder involvement is necessary to accelerate innovation, but it also builds resilience and adaptability. Next slide, please. So the third is supplier commitment and investment. So for suppliers, participation often means investing resources upfront and covering the costs of operations, maintenance, and upgrade. So this commitment is critical because you'll need to troubleshoot as we go along, as we progress through the project. But this allows you to refine your technology in real time. So while it can be a financial challenge initially, past suppliers have seen significant return when they later offer enhanced market-ready products informed by real-world project data. So that's a bonus for the suppliers, we hope. Next slide. The fourth is transit agency engagement and support. So we need champions of this technology among the transit agencies who will be part of this project. This requires a commitment of both time and resources, and we'll need you to mobilize your teams to help us test, adopt, and promote the new system. So having agencies that are fully engaged makes a meaningful difference in moving the technology forward and preparing for broader adoption. And thank you to those transit agencies who are here today who have actively participated in phase 1. Next, the fifth element is the memorandum of understanding that Josip already touched on earlier today, but this also includes some other agreements. So every project is bound by an MOU. This formalizes our collaboration, and this typically spans 2 to 5 years, so you're bound by the MOU for the duration of the project. Additionally, partners sign NDAs and agree on data sharing and IP protocols. So these agreements protect shared information and ensure that all stakeholders contribute to and benefit from the project's outcomes. So in bold right there, which Josipa also mentioned, is that all project partners must maintain their CUTRIC membership for the project's duration. Next slide, please. And the sixth element is CUTRIC's role. So CUTRIC's primary role is conducting rigorous empirical analysis to validate the technology's impact. We are funded through the program fees, public grants, and additional contributions from industry on a case-to-case basis. So our analysis provides essential data that informs decision-making and demonstrates the technology's value. So this helps pave the way for the success of this project and its wider adoption and the possible later phases of transit innovation. Next slide is just a summary. So a successful CUTRIC commercialization project relies on advancing TRLs, engaging multiple stakeholders, securing supplier commitment, and having transit agencies champion the tech and with the correct agreement framework. So these components, coupled with our analytical expertise, will enable us to drive Canada-wide transit innovation. Next slide. So in general, this is how a commercialization process progresses. So as Josipa mentioned, our goal now is to complete everything in 18 months. So we begin with market feedback to gather interest from members and what do we want to cover. So this includes focus groups and consultations such as the one that we're about to have today. The next will be a market scan. So if there is sufficient interest from members, then we proceed with a market scan to determine whether there is a broader market for the project, and then we identify which technology suppliers will be involved and what are the other components of the project that needs to be included. And the next is budgeting. So once the market scan is complete and the organization has determined that we are definitely proceeding, we form the budget. It includes an estimate of the cost of the project and an identification of who will pay for it. So the budget is then presented to potential customers, and then we determine if there's top-up that is needed. And then we officially launch a project. So if the budget is approved, the project is launched, and we proceed with the project governance. Okay, next slide, please. So for this specific project, we are here. We're at the market feedback stage. Our goal is to complete by the end of this year, such that we can proceed with the market scan by Q1 and launch the project by the end of 2025. Next slide, please. just to recap, these are all the activities with these two elements that Josipa earlier presented as part of the scope of the project. Our estimated cost to run this project is right now at 1.1 million. So this may change. This assumes a 30-month period of collecting data, such as what we did for phase 1. But once we officially confirm or refine the scope of the project further, this cost may change. That's actually all the information that I wanted to share today. I hope that that was sufficient for you to make a decision and provide inputs during our focus, our roundtable discussion. So one of the first question that we will be asking is, to what extent do you have enough information from what we have provided today to discuss internally and determine whether your organization is keen to continue participation in the early stage development and work? And if we have enough time, we have a question number 2. If you don't have enough time during the roundtable discussion, feel free to send me an email with your answer. Next slide, please, Christine. I just want to share question number 2. It's about what specific technical question at this stage do you need answered ahead of the next session in order to enable a continued engagement? Because we'll be inviting technology suppliers to the next session, we want to feed this to them so that they can proactively answer your questions and address all the anxieties and fears around this technology. Okay, with that, Josipa, did you want to add any more words while I quickly distribute everyone on the line to their respective rooms?
Yeah, no, I will just add, just as a clarifier, so that price point that we put out there is the cost of running the MOU, then running the steering committee, getting the funding, deploying it, tracking the KPIs, and then tracking all the empirical evidence, and running the public relations steering committee, the technical affairs steering committee, and then depending on how many transit and manufacturers there are, there's the transit and utility steering committee or the transit manufacturers general committee. So very similar to our EBUS steering committee process, which worked out quite well to keep things transparent. The assets themselves are separate capital assets, and those we would expect to be several millions of dollars, but depending on how many buses, how many chargers, and how many charger side units, as well as roadside units, may be required. So with that, Jenny, I think we're in a great place. What we're going to do now is, in quick fashion, we're going to break out quickly into short consulting focus groups, and then we're going to come back to plenary simply to report, is there enough go, no go to proceed forward to the next stage? And so Jenny, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I will open all the rooms now. I have randomly assigned people to rooms. If you're floating in the main room, I'll be there and assign you to another room.
Thanks so much, everyone in my group. And Jenny, over to you.
I actually wanted to turn to each moderator and give a 1-minute rundown of any highlights that you got from your room. I'll go to Desmond first. Yes, Desmond.
All right, thank you so much, Jenny. Yeah, we had an interesting group with some mixed reviews. I know, one of our members did mention that they're a small city at the moment. They're not too keen to jump on this program, and because of the advanced state of their plans, they're focusing on depot charges, and they cannot incorporate inductive charging. But I think one of the main questions that came out of for the members wanting some feedback is that what is the impact of this on the warranty of buses? So they haven't received their buses yet. They're going to receive them next year, and the warranty will run for a couple of years. And so they want to know how this program will affect the warranty. So that's the main question that really came out of my group, and hopefully we can get back to them on that if we, unless maybe Josipa, you have an idea on that.
No, that's an excellent question. We'll include that in our technical review with OEMs. It's a legitimate question, and it relates to a question that came up in our group. So perhaps, Jenny, if I can speak next in terms of summarizing our group. Thanks. One of the questions that came up in our group was from in Waterloo in particular, if there's already electric buses deployed, can we essentially retrofit an electric bus that's been deployed to use as a test rather than buying a brand new 40-foot electric bus? And that's an interesting open question that has an effect on warranty as well. So our general understanding from the manufacturers is if there's any aftermarket change to the vehicle, in particular anything affecting propulsion, the warranty is null and void generally. That's generally like starting principles. However, this is a demonstration integration trial, and if the OEM is part of it and the OEM is willing to help retrofit their vehicle for their own purposes, it's not something that's off the table, in my view. Where it would have an effect on warranty is if we went and kind of manhandled the vehicle and ripped out the guts and changed the propulsion and charging system without incorporating the OEM, then I can understand they would say the warranty is null and void. So we would aim to not do that. Hence, the collaborative process here is bringing the OEMs in on day one to make sure they're part of it, whether it's their new bus or it's a retrofitted vehicle. They are swallowing even some of the losses on helping to make that happen. So that's been our success in the past, and that came up in our group. And I'll just add two more items. So we had smaller agencies in our group as well. And the key thing there was there's enough interest. Say, for example, at Kodiak, Bob shared with us, there's enough technical interest here. All solutions are on the table. It's always a matter of funding. So if CUTRIC can essentially bring to the table the money and a large chunk of the money, which is typically part of our role in these projects, then there would be a lot of technical interest or potentially enough to explore this. We'd be keen to see a small agency deploy because it does prove out it could be nimble for a small agency. And as part of that funding discussion, what came out also is potentially in the Canada Public Transit Fund, and I do agree with this, that within the targeted funding category, there could be a play here for us to say this is legitimate capital deployment of zero emissions vehicles. So these trials should be funded within the Canada Public Transit Fund, specifically in the targeted funded third category, where money should start to roll. So those were some of the core points up in our group, and there is enough interest to proceed forward if we can talk about the funding solution component and the use of retrofitted vehicles. Over to you, Jen.
Thank you, Desmond and Josipa. Jess, would you be able to share highlights from your group?
Absolutely. We're hearing something a bit similar to what Josipa just talked about, and how kind of integrating that technology either into existing buses or buses that are already have been procured and kind of where that fits in. We did chat very quickly about how, as we're looking at the technology assessment and the gap analysis, that's something that we would be discussing and we'd be moving forward with. We also had a question in regards to the cost of joining, in-kind versus top-up contributions. And again, we kind of circled back around, and as part of a stage of the timeline here, we'd be looking at being able to discuss that and having off ramps if they got to a place where they weren't able to continue forward.
Very interesting insights from everyone. We're 1 minute to the end of the session, so I want to thank everyone for participating today. We do have the consultation session number 2 scheduled for November 28th. Please watch out for our invitation, and we will pre-register again those who have already expressed interest, just to save a little bit of time. And we will be talking to our technical to our suppliers of technology so that they can present in detail the detailed specs of their products and services. I want to turn it over to you, Josipa, for a few closing remarks.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone with 1 minute to go. We're excited that we launched the ZEB database. Please take a look at that. And if you're struggling with your portal, let us know. It's a membership value that we've got it in there. But I do believe this is like one of the next big things. In addition to the ACES Data Trust, which is track every bus and charger and fueling system out there, I do think in terms of interoperability, this is the last stand on the charging systems. It's inductive, and it might not be a huge play. It might not be everybody's solution. But if it can be made to be secure, low cost, safe, cyber secure, and deployable, it's one of the solutions. And we all know how expensive charging systems are, depot and pantograph, and how exhaustive they are. So anything that can add to the nimbleness of the industry might help to bring costs down the road. So stay tuned. I think we've got enough. We're going to summarize everything that was talked about today, send out the notes for folks to see, and then we welcome you back to the next session. Between now and the next session, we'll be doing some one-to-one engagement with agencies here to see if we could get a partial go, no go on the sense of if we can bring the money to the table and get the budget to work. Thank you again, everyone.